There's a specific kind of quiet that happens right before everything falls apart. Not silence exactly. More like the world holding its breath. I felt it the moment I walked into my parents' house that Saturday evening. The smell of my mom's pot roast, the hum of the TV in the background, my brother's laugh carrying in from the living room. Everything familiar. Everything roomy. I should have turned around, I didn't. My name is Nora. I'm 31 years old, and for 4 years I quietly paid for a life my family believed they built themselves. Let me explain what I mean by that. I graduated from Georgia Tech at 22 with a degree in computer science, while my brother Ethan was still figuring things out. His words, always his words. I was already 2 years into a job at a mid-sized software company in Atlanta. By 26, I was a senior engineer. By 28, I was clearing $140,000 a year with bonuses. My family knew I did well. They didn't know how well. That distinction mattered more than I ever realized. Here's what they also didn't know. Starting 4 years ago, I had been quietly transferring money into my parents' account every single month. Not because they asked, at least not at first. Because my dad's back injury had cut his hours at work, my mom's part-time bookkeeping job didn't stretch far enough, and I watched them dip into savings they didn't have. I paid their mortgage shortfall twice without telling them where the money came from. I covered my brother's car insurance when he let it lapse. I sent my mom $800 in December because she mentioned offhand that she couldn't afford to get the furnace serviced before winter. I kept records of every single transfer, not because I planned to use them, just because I'm an engineer. I document things. It's what I do. 4 years, $94,000, most of it in amounts small enough that no one piece ever felt significant. $600 here, 12-timer dollars there, a few larger ones mixed in, scattered across time so it looked like luck or savings or just mom and dad managing fine. I want to be clear about something. I didn't do it so they'd be grateful. I did it because they were struggling and I could help. That's it. That's the whole reason. The problem with quiet sacrifices, though, is that people tend to fill the silence you leave with their own story. And the story my family told themselves about who needed who, about who had made it and who hadn't, had nothing to do with reality. Ethan is 3 years older than me. He works in sales, the kind that sounds impressive when you say it at a party and looks different on a bank statement. He's charming in the way people can be when they've never had to try too hard for anything. Growing up, he was the one our parents pointed to, the athlete, the one with the easy smile. Teachers loved him. Neighbors asked about him. When he walked into a room, the room shifted toward him. I walked into rooms and people checked their phones. I made peace with that a long time ago. Or I thought I did. Ethan had been talking for about 2 years about starting his own business, a sports equipment rental company targeting college rec leagues. It wasn't a bad idea. It also wasn't a developed idea. Every time I asked him about the business plan, the conversation bounced somewhere else. Every time I asked about startup capital, he'd say he was working on it. What I didn't know, what I found out later, was that he'd been telling my parents for months that all he needed was a solid investment from someone who believed in him. And somehow, in some conversation I wasn't part of, my name had come up as that someone. No one told me. No one asked me. They just planned the dinner. I got a text from my mom on a Thursday. We're all getting together Saturday. Pot roast. Come around 6. Normal enough. I confirmed, showed up at 6:15 with a bottle of Pinot Noir and a container of brownies I'd made the night before. My dad was in his chair. My mom was in the kitchen. Ethan was on the couch, looking slightly too comfortable, which, in retrospect, was the first sign. We ate dinner. The pot roast was good. My mom asked about my job. My dad asked about my apartment. Ethan asked about my car, specifically whether I'd thought about trading it in, and then immediately launched into something about depreciation rates that I half listened to. It felt like a regular Saturday. It wasn't. After the plates were cleared, my mom brought out coffee, and my dad leaned forward in his chair, and there was this shift, subtle, almost physical, where the energy in the room changed. Ethan straightened up. My mom's hands folded on the table. My dad cleared his throat. Nora, we've been talking as a family, and we think it's time you stepped up a little more. I set down my coffee cup. Stepped up how? Ethan's business is ready. He just needs the initial capital to get going. And we think you should invest, my mom said. Cleaner, more direct than my dad usually was. $50,000. It would get him off the ground, and honestly, it's time you contributed something real to this family. The word real landed somewhere in my chest. Something real, I repeated. You make good money, Nora. My dad again. You've got no kids, no mortgage, your expenses are low. Ethan has a family vision here, and family steps up. I looked at my brother. He had the grace to not look directly at me, staring slightly to the left of my face. Did you know about this? I asked him. He spread his hands. I mentioned I was looking for investors. I didn't know they were going to. We're not asking you to give it away, my mom cut in. It's an investment. You'd get it back. I took a breath. In that breath, I made a decision. Can I ask you something first? My mom nodded. How do you think you paid for the furnace service in December of 2021? She blinked. We had it in savings. You didn't. I transferred Hintrady 80 to your account on December 9th, 2021. I have the receipt. Silence. What about the mortgage shortfall in March of 2022? And again in August? My dad frowned. I called the bank on your behalf both times. I transferred the difference. $640 in March, $810 in August. My mom's face had changed. Not dramatically, she wasn't a dramatic woman, but something behind her eyes shifted. Ethan's car insurance lapsed in January of 2022. You told me it was a billing glitch. I paid the reinstatement fee and 3 months forward because I didn't want him driving uninsured. Ethan opened his mouth. Closed it. I pulled out my phone, not because I needed to. I had those numbers memorized, but because I wanted them to see the document. I wanted it to be real and visible and undeniable in a way that words alone sometimes aren't. 4 years, I said. $94,320. In transfers, covered bills, and direct payments. All of it documented. All of it from me. The room was very quiet. My mom looked at my dad. My dad looked at the table. Ethan was staring at his coffee mug like it had personally offended him. My mom started. That's what contributing to this family looks like, I said. For 4 years, quietly, without asking for anything back, without making anyone feel small about needing help. I stood up and picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. I love you. I love all of you. But I won't be writing a $50,000 check for a business plan I've never seen, in a meeting I wasn't told was happening, to solve a problem I've apparently already been solving for 4 years without anyone noticing. I want to tell you I walked out of there feeling powerful, like the music swelled and the door closed behind me and I exhaled into the night air and everything crystallized into clarity. That's not what happened. What happened is I sat in my car in the driveway for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I stared at the clock. My hands were shaking a little. Not from anger. I wasn't angry, not really. More like the adrenaline that comes from saying something true out loud for the first time. Something you've carried so quietly for so long that the act of releasing it feels violent even when it isn't. My mom texted me when I was on the highway. We didn't know. Why didn't you tell us? I didn't answer that night. I didn't know how to answer it without saying something I'd regret. I thought about it for 3 days. On Wednesday, I typed back, because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me. That was my mistake. I should have let us have an honest conversation a long time ago. She replied, Can we talk? I said, Yes, but not yet. My dad called me the following weekend, not to argue, which surprised me, but to ask questions. Practical ones, the way engineers ask questions, which I've always thought is something he and I share without either of us ever acknowledging it. He asked how much of it had come out of savings versus income. He asked whether I'd taken a hit anywhere doing it. He asked, quietly, almost like he was embarrassed to, how long I'd known the furnace situation was bad. I told him I'd known since October. I'd waited until I had the money set aside so I could do it cleanly. He was quiet for a long time after that. "You should have told us," he said finally. "I know," I said. "I think I was scared you'd tell me not to." He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite anything else. "Yeah," he said, "we probably would have. That conversation didn't fix everything. I want to be honest about that. Families don't fix in a single phone call, or even in a season of phone calls. There were more conversations after that, some of them hard, one of them genuinely ugly, one where Ethan said something I'll probably need a few more years to fully let go of. But that first call with my dad felt like something shifting. Not healing exactly, more like the first honest thing we'd said to each other in years. Ethan didn't start his business. Or rather, he did, but not the way he'd planned. Without my $50,000, he had to actually develop the plan to pitch to outside investors. And in doing that, he discovered some parts of it weren't viable. He scaled it down. Started small, genuinely small, out of a storage unit in Marietta with a few sets of equipment and a website my cousin helped him build. It's not glamorous. But the last time I saw him, he seemed lighter than he had in years. Like the weight of the almost had finally been replaced by the weight of the actual. I didn't give him $50,000. I did, months later, help him set up a proper LLC structure and walked him through what he needed for a basic business bank account. I didn't do it because he deserved it, or because I owed him. I did it because it cost me 2 hours, and I'm good at that stuff. And he's still my brother. That's the thing about family that no one tells you clearly enough. Love and accountability are not opposites. You can love someone completely and still refuse to hand them a check that enables them to keep avoiding the hard work. You can set a limit and not be cruel. You can say no and still show up the next time something matters. I stopped the transfers the month after that dinner. All of them. I won't pretend that was easy. The first time I saw my parents' mortgage statement come up in conversation and I didn't immediately calculate what I could cover, I felt a guilt that sat in my stomach for weeks. The habit of quietly fixing things is a hard one to break, especially when the fixing has become so automatic you've stopped registering it as a choice. But here's what I did instead. I started talking. I told my parents what I could and couldn't do. When my mom mentioned the property taxes were going to be tighter this year, I said, "Let's look at that together," instead of "I'll handle it." Different words, completely different relationship. My parents are proud people. I had robbed them, without meaning to, of the chance to know how close things actually were. That's on me. I thought I was protecting them. I think what I was actually doing was protecting myself from the discomfort of having the real conversation, from the risk of them saying don't and me not knowing how to handle that. The dinner cracked that open, painfully, messily, in a way that involves me shaking in a driveway at 9 o'clock at night. But it cracked it open. There's a thing that happens when you stop shrinking yourself to keep the peace, when you stop carrying things in silence because silence felt safer than asking to be seen. People adjust. It takes time. It's uncomfortable in ways you don't fully anticipate, but they adjust. My mom and I talk differently now. Straighter. Less performance of okayness. More actual okayness. We're not all the way there. I'm not sure families ever get all the way there. But the pot roast still smells the same when I walk in the door, and last month she asked my advice about refinancing and actually listened to the answer, and that feels like something. I'm not writing this because I want you to think I had it figured out. I didn't. I made a years-long mistake in the direction of overgiving, and I corrected it badly, and then slowly better. I'm writing it because I know what it's like to pour yourself quietly into people who don't see it, and to start to wonder. In the small hours, in the car, in the middle of a dinner that's supposed to be normal, whether being seen was ever something you were allowed to want. You are. That's the whole thing. That's all of it. You are allowed to be seen. You are allowed to say, "Here is what I've given, and here is where I stop." You are allowed to love people fully and still refuse to disappear inside of it. The dinner was the worst moment and the most necessary moment of the last 4 years of my life. I walked out of that house not knowing what came next. I still don't know everything that comes next, but I walked out. And some nights, when I'm sitting in my apartment in Atlanta with a cup of coffee and the particular quiet that I've learned to like rather than fear, that feels like enough. I've thought a lot about why it took me 4 years to say anything. The easy answer is that I didn't want to cause conflict. The honest answer is harder to sit with. I didn't say anything because some part of me believed that being needed was the closest thing to being valued that I was going to get. So I kept transferring money. I kept covering the shortfalls. I kept fixing things quietly, from a distance, in amounts small enough that no one would have to acknowledge them. That's not generosity. That's a coping mechanism dressed up as generosity. And I think a lot of people, especially women, especially daughters who learned early that keeping the peace was their job, know exactly what I'm talking about. What happened at that dinner was the consequence of 4 years of choices, mine and theirs. My dad didn't wake up that Saturday intending to be cruel. He genuinely believed the story he'd been telling himself, that he and my mom had held things together, that Ethan needed a boost, that I had plenty and therefore could give plenty. He believed it because I had never given him any information to the contrary. The silence I maintained to protect everyone's feelings became the silence that let a false story grow until it was large enough to be sat around a dinner table and presented to me as fact. That's how it works, I think. Not with villains and victims, mostly. With gaps in honesty that fill up slowly over time until one day someone says something at a pot roast dinner that cracks the whole thing open. I don't regret showing them the transfers. I regret that I waited until I was cornered to do it. There's a difference between setting a boundary from a place of clarity and setting it from a place of having been pushed too far. And that Saturday night, I was somewhere between the two. I wasn't proud of myself for shaking in the driveway, but I was proud of myself for not writing the check. Here's what I've come to understand. The people who love you can also have a completely distorted picture of what you've given and what you owe. Those two things coexist all the time in real families. Loving someone doesn't make you accurate about them, and allowing people to be inaccurate about you for years, quietly, to avoid discomfort is not kindness. It's a slow erasure that you participate in. Ethan figuring out his business on a smaller, harder, realer scale is the best thing that could have happened to him. Not because struggle is inherently good, but because the version of success that gets handed to you by someone else's sacrifice doesn't actually belong to you. It doesn't build the thing inside you that makes success mean something. He's learning that now. I can see it in him, and I'm learning something too. That being seen requires letting yourself be known. That honesty, even when it shakes your hands and costs you a night of sleep, is the only thing that makes a relationship real. I spent 4 years trying to love my family from behind a wall of quiet self-erasure. What I have now, imperfect, ongoing, sometimes uncomfortable, is something closer to the truth. That's what I'll take from all of it. Not the $94,000, not the dinner, the truth.